You guys ready to raise the standard? Yeah? All right. So, when we set out to do shooting sports, there was a great temptation to rush it out, right? Because everybody wanted these badges, everybody wanted to get going and start doing, right? But there's something to be said, and I'm glad Mark said it earlier. There's something to be said for slowing down and taking the time to do something right. Something that in 100 years from now, 200 years from now, is still going to be solid, right? So we spent the time to do it, and I think we did it right. And one of the philosophies that I wanted to make sure we brought to shooting sports, because I think if we did it fast, we would have ended up with something very mediocre. We would have said to boys, come with us to the range, and we'll shoot at some targets, and if you shoot a group this tight, you get a badge, and we're done. That's not what we're going to do in trail life. We said, no. Let's throw all that out, and let's start from scratch. And what is it we are in trail life? We're Christ-centered. So let's start there. And let's build a shooting sports program around the ideas of the Bible, about the ideas of Christ-centered outdoor adventure for young people. So that's what we did. And we had some guiding principles that said, okay, boys are going to learn about firearms, about bows, about arrows. They're going to learn about these things, whether we teach them or not. The question is, are they going to learn about them from television and video games, which are very unrealistic representations of these things? Or are they going to learn about them in a safe, Christ-centered environment that we can provide them in trail life? What do you think we chose? All right. We chose that Christ-centered environment. So if we can get, I think there's slides that are going to roll. So here's the cover of the guidebook. If we go ahead and go to the next slide, we'll talk more about that. So here's the shooting sports program vision. And you'll see these things embodied in the trail badges as well. But it's to embody the concepts of American heritage, individual responsibility, and adventure for members of the Trail Life USA through a safe yet diverse shooting sports program that is tailored to embrace regional differences. Okay? So hopefully that's good. What I want to do in the next couple slides is talk through the pieces of this vision and really explain to you kind of the philosophy and the vision of how that came to be. And then when we have our breakout session at 4 o'clock, we'll get down into the weeds of the individual pieces of the program. So if we can go ahead and advance the slide. So here's the pieces of that, right? So we started with Christ-centered because we can't compromise on that. We can't remove that from what we do in trail life. We should never do that. And so we wanted to make sure that the team always kept that first and foremost. So one of the things that you'll find in these awesome trail badges, which we're so excited are available today, is those different components, the American heritage, the individual responsibility, the adventure, there's components of each of those built into the trail badges. So we wanted to make sure that we have that same mindset, whether we're doing an airsoft activity, whether we're doing archery, or whether we're going on our first hunt. We want to make sure that we embodied each of those elements into what we're doing. And that really comes to the idea that a trailman knows that firearms, bows, arrows, all these things, like anything, is a gift from God, right? And when we think about things in those terms, it kind of frames it in a distinctive manner. And so we take something that's a unique American pastime, like shooting sports and firearms and that culture, we should look at it through that lens. And so I think what we've got is something that really has a Christ-centered flavor in a big way to that effect. And just a few examples of that. You start to think about things that you do in a paintball or airsoft environment. Okay, there's a lot of sportsmanship involved there. Particularly in airsoft, you have the integrity to say that you were hit and go out. Things like that we can apply and bring in to the experience for the boys, and always, 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 in all things, win or lose, point them back to Jesus Christ. So American heritage, that's the other piece of it. Well, obviously, in America, we have a firearms culture. We have a Second Amendment. We all like the Second Amendment, hopefully. But, all right, good. But something about the Second Amendment that I think sometimes we don't pay enough attention to, it's not that Second Amendment that gives you that right to enjoy and use firearms for good things. It's not. That's a gift from God. The Second Amendment is a mere representation of that God-given right on paper, right? We want to make sure that we embrace that American culture and that we pass that on. That's a very important thing. You start to think about things like hunting in particular. That's a cultural thing we pass down, right? And we don't want to lose that. So there's an American heritage component to each of these things. Individual responsibility. That's how we frame safety, right? You start to think about how, we could sit there and we could have a safety lecture about firearms, and that'd be awesome, but think of all the biblical things you can tie to that with individual responsibility. Be faithful in the little things, and you move on to the bigger things. It's those little details that will teach a Woodlands boy early on with his first experience with a BB gun that he will then apply in new, exciting ways as he grows up through the program. So that's exciting to see. Adventure. Of course, promise of adventure is what we're all about. That's what draws boys to our program and hopefully what keeps them in our program. And if they're leaving our program, it's probably because we failed to deliver the promise of adventure. So shooting sports is a great way to really give some unique adventures. And I think you'll find some things, even if you're a seasoned shooter, I think you'll find some things that we've adopted and embraced in the shooting sports program that you might not have thought of. Archery tag. Has anybody done archery tag? It's amazing. Archery tag is amazing. You've got to do it. So there's things like that we hope we're introducing you to with this program. Now, one of the big distinctives is regional differences, okay? This is really important to how Trail Life Shooting Sports is operating. So we didn't want to say because you can't do it in state A that no one can do it. Because that brings you to the lowest denominator of what's possible. I want to maximize opportunities for boys to do things and learn about Christ, doing adventure and trail life, and that's a limiting factor we're just not going to accept. So if we can go ahead and advance the slide, that's the right lead into what do you need to do as a leader who wants to do a shooting sports activity? Well, it's simple. We've boiled it down to 3 things. First thing, the question to ask yourself is this shooting sports activity legal and lawful in my area? Yes or no? If you can say yes to that, we go to our charter organization and we say, hey, charter organization, do you approve of this shooting sports activity? And at that point, they can say yes or no, or yes with a caveat, or yes but only here, or yes only for these ages, whatever. It's up to the charter org. They own the charter. If you get a yes to number 2, you can move on to the third question. Is there qualified supervision for this activity? And this is where we put great emphasis. Because one of the things that we do in the guidebook, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a moment, is we're trying to connect you to qualified supervision for your activity. If you're a troop master and you boys want to go shooting, but you don't know anything about it and you've never been shooting, and it's legal and lawful in your area, and your charter org approves, but you don't know how to take that next step, the guidebook is a resource to connect you to finding that local instructor, that local subject matter expert who can help you pull that event off and pull that event off safely. So boiling it down to just 3 things. Can you answer these 3 questions? And the guidebook helps guide you through that. So if we can go ahead and advance to the next slide. So here's the guidebook. And this is available in Troop Track. It's available here in our store if you want a hard copy. And one of the things at the end of this guidebook is, there's a number of first aid requirements and things. We'll talk all about that in the session at 4. But answering those 3 questions, everything in this guidebook is bent around helping you do that and helping you look at shooting sports from the perspective of Christ-centered mentality. Well, one final thing I want to do real quickly in introducing this is, and the guidebook speaks to this, is for our older boys, we really wanted to build in the ideas of education and learn by doing and instruction. And there's some really cool opportunities for adventure age boys in shooting sports to become instructors, apprentice instructor programs. So I'd like to invite up Donnie to help me out here. Donnie is an apprentice instructor in the National Rifle Association. And under the leadership of a full-blown instructor, he can teach courses. He has gone through all the same training that I've gone through as an instructor. And he's an adventurer. So I want to give him the opportunity to talk a little bit about what it means to be an apprentice instructor, the cool opportunity that grants him as a youth in our program.
Good morning, everybody. Glad to be here to talk to you about what an apprentice instructor is. I did this with a few of my friends whenever I was 15. We took the same course as a normal instructor would. Had to have the same knowledge, skills, and attitude in order to do it. Had to demonstrate all of the same requirements. And as long as an instructor is behind us, supervising us, we could teach woodlands how to shoot .22s or navigators to shoot shotguns or bows and arrows and different things that we've learned. Our troop, SC 9212, has also done black powder, crossbows, and we've gone on hunting trips too. So we've had a lot of enjoyment becoming apprentice instructors, me and my friends.
Youth leadership in action right here, guys. This is youth leadership in action, and that's exciting to me about the shooting sports program. It's this, again, how can we raise the standard? How can we do something different? And I think we're just at the tip of the iceberg of what we can do with getting young people involved in training other young people in shooting sports. So this is a huge thing. I'm very excited about it. I hope you'll all come to the session at 4 o'clock. He'll be there, and a bunch of the committee members that help put this together will be there to answer questions. And I want to recognize those committee guys. If you're here, go ahead and stand up if you served on that committee, because these folks represent millions of rounds going downrange safely. I want to acknowledge what they've done to help put this program together. And that's all I got.